Hey guys, this is Jay of Jay's Reviews here, and after 5 long years, it's finally time to do my first review, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, for the PlayStation 2. So without further ado, let's start the review. Back in the late 90s, there was a large amount of 3D platformers in the PlayStation and Nintendo 64. Rising company Sucker Punch decided to give it a try with their first game, Rocket Robot on Wheels, which honestly I've never played before, and apparently I'm not the only one given the .12 million copies sold estimate on VG charts. Basically, from what I gathered from Gexup's review, anybody remember him? Released in fall of 1999 on the N64, the game heavily used physics to do basic game mechanics, just solving puzzles. The game was about Rocket, a robot guarding an amusement park, and one of the animals wants to ruin the park's opening. Not a game I'd play, but it certainly looks like it's decent enough. Anyway, after that failure, Sucker Punch moved on to work with Sony on their very successful console, the PS2. This time their idea was to make a 3D platformer heavy on stealth, containing a very stylized world with heavy emphasis on character and story. I mean, platformers had stealth sections before and after, but this is one of the first platformers to make it a central game mechanic. Anyway, in September of 2002, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus was released in North America, and in Europe the game was known as Sly Raccoon. When the game was released, it sold moderately well, with 1.21 million copies sold, and while it was no Jak and Daxter, it was enough to get sequels. My first gaming device was the Game Boy Advance, but my first console was the PlayStation 2, where I played a lot of its great games in its huge library, one of them being Sly Cooper. My first experience with the Sly Cooper series was when I was at Target, and I was immediately drawn to the visual style of Sly 2 Band of Thieves. And it was bought for me, and I played it until I had no idea what an R3 button was. But hey, once I did, I really got into the game and its characters. And when it came to buying Sly 1, I was also at Target, but my options were Sly 1 and the PS2 version of Sonic Heroes. Glad I went with this game. So anyway, for this marathon, we'll be taking a look at all 3 games in the original trilogy and all their various re-releases and ports. So with that said, let's start with the story. Sly 1 opens with a really great scene where Sly is seen in shadows and he's making his way to Police HQ, where Sly is planning on stealing a secret police case file, to which Carmelita Fox, a dedicated member of the police force, tries to stop him. But after a scene of witty dialogue, Sly escapes, and it's then where we will learn about Sly and his background. Sly Cooper comes from a long line of master thieves who recorded all their famous moves in an ancient book, the Thievius Raccoonus. Sly was meant to read the book, but on that day, a group known as the Fiendish Five, consisting of Sir Raleigh the Frog, Mugshot, Ms. Ruby, the Panda King, and Clockwork. Sly's parents are then killed, to which the Fiendish Five then steals the Thievius Raccoonus, splitting it into 5 pieces and going all over the world. Sly is then left in an orphanage where he meets his lifelong friends, Bentley, technical genius and team strategist, and Murray, the guy who drives the van. Yeah, in this game, Murray doesn't get much development, but hey, at least he's still a likable character, so that's all that really matters. Anyway, the trio decide to avenge Sly's father and steal back the Thievius Raccoonus, taking down each member of the Fiendish Five along the way. I really love this game's story. The characters are likable, the villains are memorable, and by far the best part of the story is that it's the classic hero's journey, only turned on its head. Sly goes on an adventure, he gets stronger, he proves something. Only this time it's about a character who would be traditionally be the villain. The game also has some good humor to it as well. And the story and characters is probably why I go back to this game so often, in the trilogy as a matter of fact. A good story and memorable characters can really add to a game's replay value in my opinion. Gameplay wise, I want to dispel one myth about this game right now. People say that Sly Cooper is a ripoff of Crash Bandicoot, just because in both games you travel from point A to point B, but this is such a minor similarity that it hurts when people say that. I mean, Crash Bandicoot is much more of a Donkey Kong Country ripoff than Sly is to Crash. I mean, in DKC and Crash, you play as an animal who goes through jungles, and levels get more industrialized as you go along, riding on animals, and collecting fruit. Sly 1 does barely any of these things. I mean, if progression really makes something a ripoff, then Crash Bandicoot rips off a lot of games. So yeah, even at that, I find Sly 1 more enjoyable than Crash anyway. As for the actual game, Sly's controls are very smooth, as it should be if he's pulling off all the moves that he does. At the beginning of the game, Sly can only run, jump, double jump, and swing the family cane as his melee attack, climb on pipes and ropes, and walk across narrow footing. By defeating each boss, Sly gets one page of the Thievius Raccoonus, which gives him one extra ability: landing on tiny points, running on ropes, going invisible, and adding to the team van. But that last one's pretty useless because it doesn't impact gameplay at all. In the levels, you can collect clue bottles, numbers ranging from 20, 30, and 40. Bentley combines the clues to give Sly the code for the vault at the end of the level. Collecting the clues is pretty easy, except for a few levels where the bottles can be obscured by the camera, leading to a lot of annoying backtracking. Upon collecting all the clues, you can input a code into a vault and get an optional page of the Thievius Raccoonus. And these additional abilities range from extra attacks to general abilities like slowing down time. However, other than the rolling ability and the time speed up, I never use a lot of these abilities because they're completely useless, like the hat bomb or the decoy. Some are really overpowered, like not taking damage from water or bottomless pits, and some can be improvements over other items like being able to freely move while invisible, although it is still far too slow. In this game, a pretty archaic element would be that Sly can only take one hit before he dies. I mean, in the levels you can collect, or just collect 100 coins, you will find a lucky charm, and this serves as a hit point and you can collect a maximum of 2. Get hit without 1 and you'll lose a life. This is the only distinct Crash Bandicoot parallel I can find in this game. I mean, lives are pretty archaic anyway, because Jak and Daxter, which came out before, didn't even have lives, and neither did Ratchet and Clank, which came out 2 months later. And in today's day and age, there really is no point for lives anyway, because we can just save and start the level we died at. I'm looking at you, Mario and Sonic. As for the stealth, I mean, you can see the Metal Gear Solid parallels with how Sly uses a barrel ride in a few levels. The game even has a parody of the codec conversations via the Binocucom. However, in the game, there are a few stealth sections, but it's not much deeper than avoiding searchlights and dodging enemies. I mean, in MGS, it was necessary to hide from enemies, whereas in this game, enemies are as dumb as bricks, so avoiding enemies isn't that big of a deal, but sometimes it can be if you don't have any lucky charms. The camera control is alright, but not the best. I mean, sometimes it can get caught on things, but it's not really a big deal. When we're not platforming, we are doing gimmick levels, and in this game, I don't say these are very well integrated into the plot, but fighting crabs in Chapter 1 is fine, riding a gun turn in Chapter 3 and 4 is fine, and Chapter 5 is pretty much a minigame collection. Protecting Murray in Chapter 2 is fine, but I hate it in Chapter 4 because it's long with no checkpoints. And racing in Chapter 2 and 4 is garbage because it controls horribly, especially in Chapter 4 when there's ice on the ground. But what makes them really bad is that the AI has a very high advantage over you, and it's just they seem to be going a lot faster than you, and you have to take advantage of the boost upgrades that you can get on the track. But with that said, I think the gameplay is pretty much covered. The game is separated into 5 worlds for each Fiendish 5 member, and 7 levels each. The first level has a key to get into the hub, and the next few levels have keys to get into the second area of the hub, which has levels to which you can get to the boss. The Cooper Gang visits England, America, Haiti, China, and Russia, all featuring diverse visuals. I love how each chapter starts with a cheesy title card. Within each world, the locations and areas you go to are very distinct, so nothing ever gets repetitive in the game visually. In this game, the difficulty can be very high for newcomers, given the weird health system. However, ultimately, I can't say I find this game very difficult, other than the third boss. That makes a nice segue into the bosses. The first boss against Raleigh is pretty easy, just be observant and you'll win. Mugshot just requires you to hit mirrors, and Panda King is a bit of a button masher. But Miss Ruby is a musical minigame where you have to match the button presses with the music, and it annoys me, and I usually die like 10 plus times. The presentation is also really good. I mean, the resolution is low on my footage, but I really enjoy the cel-shaded art style. It looks really nice, and the lighting too is great. People often cite the Wind Waker as what started cel-shaded art styles in games, but Sly Cooper predates the Wind Waker by 1 year in North America. The voice acting is also great. Matt Olson's Bentley is shaky, but he gets better as the game goes on, and Chris Murphy's Murray is fun and enjoyable. The villains all have good voice acting, and Carmelita is pretty bland, but her voice acting changes as time goes on. But Kevin Miller as Sly steals the show, He delivers a great performance. He really adds to the great script. Sly has plenty of witty lines, well delivered by Kevin Miller. But he also knows how to shut up and take it seriously.
How delightful! We have a guest. The only thing is, I hate unexpected guests!
Listen, Raleigh, wipe up my family and steal what's mine, you better expect company.
Kevin Miller also makes Sly a really endearing character, where you really root for him to be successful in his mission. And the soundtrack also builds an awesome atmosphere that fits the locations and are really catchy. Not every song is a home run, but this is my second favorite soundtrack in the series. I also really enjoy the animated cutscenes, adding a lot of personality to the game, but I also enjoy the anime cutscenes for the Japanese version. The game also runs very well with minimal glitches, other than one while recording this footage that I found at the very end of the game. But with that, we've reached the end of the game. So if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to this point in the video to avoid spoilers. With that, you've been warned. Basically, we play a few gimmick levels until Sly makes his way into Clockwork's lair, only to see Carmelita kidnapped, and attempts a rescue, only to find out that it's a trap. And Bentley's hacking skills get them both out of the situation, only for one final tower climb, and Sly boards Carmelita's jetpack, and the final battle begins. Carmelita will shoot Clockwork, and you have to shoot the spot that she shot at to do damage. And Sly is then told that Clockwork kept himself alive for hundreds of years with his unrivaled hatred for the Coopers, and had his mortal body replaced with machinery so he could continue to try and overthrow the Coopers as the greatest thief ever. He left Sly alive to prove that without the Thievius Raccoonus, the Cooper line was nothing. However, through our efforts, we prove him wrong, adding to the hero's journey point I was making earlier in the video. I mean, we didn't have to collect all the pages of the Thievius Raccoonus, and yet we could still beat Clockwork. But at last, Sly avenges his father and steals back the Thievius Raccoonus, and the Cooper gang leaves for their next adventure. And after the game, we can access one last vault previously unopenable, and then the book is restored. Once the game is complete, we can then play through the Master Thief time trials, where you have to beat the stage in a limited amount of time. Problem is, the timing on these is really obnoxiously strict, so thanks to this I've only ever been able to beat a couple of these, and because this Sly one is the only game in the trilogy I haven't 100%ed yet. However, the reward for doing this is really cool. You unlock the designer's commentary.
So this is the approach leading into Raleigh's Store Machine boat. And this is one of the first levels of the game we made,
where the developers talk over how they designed the levels while you play through it. In the PS2 version only, but we'll get back to that in a Sly 3 review. This is really cool, but the time trials are just too hard. Beating them all unlocks a behind-the-scenes movie where we see the original designs of Sly, which makes me happy Sly is the character he is. Overall, what's my opinion on Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus? Well, I love this game to death, but the difficulty for newcomers due to its health system can be a turnoff, but I still really love this game and consider it a wonderfully designed game with an immersive world and characters and great story. Next up is Sly 2: A Band of Thieves, which is easily one of my favorite games of all time. So with that said, this has been Jay of Jay's Reviews, signing out. Now that the video is over, I just want to mention that I hope you enjoyed it, because it literally has been 5 years in the making, so I'm glad it's finally happening. But I would have to thank my friends Exoparadigm Gamer, the SideQuest Gamer, and Haydox, although fortunately he's no longer with us on YouTube. It's still, I have to thank them all, because I don't think without them I'd even have the motivation to actually do this. So, with that said, this has been Jay of Jay's Reviews, signing out.